Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're decoding the complex, multi-layered psychology of a narcissist. It's a term we hear thrown around constantly in everyday conversation, right? But the clinical reality of pathological narcissism is way more fascinating and, honestly, way more destructive than just simple vanity. We're going to break down the exact mechanisms of grandiosity, pulling from extensive psychological research to look at how these individuals operate from the inside out.
So I want you to start by asking yourself this. When a narcissist looks in the mirror, what do they actually see? It's kind of this central mystery we are unraveling today. Because if you've ever interacted with someone who has deep narcissistic traits, you know for sure there is a severe, almost disorienting disconnect between their internal reality and the outside world. To survive, they literally have to manipulate that reflection. To truly understand this pathology, we're going to use a framework we'll call the 3 mirrors. This explores how they see themselves, how others actually see them, and finally, and this is the wild part, how they think others see them. Section 1. Inside the narcissist's reality.
Okay, let's dive right into this by defining 2 absolutely crucial psychological categories that dictate human behavior and how we judge one another. On one side, we have agentic traits. These are all about getting ahead, things like intelligence, power, dominance, and extroversion. On the flip side, we have communal traits. These are about getting along. Agreeableness, reliability, warmth, honesty. How much a person values these 2 different buckets tells you pretty much everything you need to know about their personality profile. Section 2. Mirror 1. Self-perception. This first mirror is the internal reality of a narcissist. When they look into it, they essentially see a superhero staring back. It's a highly guarded, heavily biased self-assessment that serves as the foundation for how they interact with everyone else in their lives. Clinical studies show that narcissists heavily self-enhance, meaning they drastically overestimate their own abilities. But here's the kicker. They only do this for those agentic traits. They view themselves as highly intelligent, intensely extroverted, completely dominant, and, incredibly attractive. In fact, research shows that even when narcissists are given objective, negative feedback, like, say, watching a video recording of themselves bombing a group task, they'll just ignore objective reality. They will literally ignore it and continue to rate their performance as vastly superior to everyone else's.
Which brings us to their core motivation. For most of us, there's a pretty healthy balance between wanting to be respected and wanting to be liked. For the narcissist, there is nearly zero interest in being liked for communal traits like warmth, reliability, or morality. They solely want to be admired for their power and superiority. They don't care if you think they are a good person. They only care that you know they are an exceptional, dominant person. Section 3. Mirror 2. The outside view. Now, think about how you actually perceive the grandiose personalities in your own life. What's truly interesting here is how quickly we pick up on their pathology. We often think of them as these master manipulators who fool everyone for years, but the data says something completely different. People are actually able to detect narcissism in what psychologists call zero-acquaintance situations. We pick up on unconscious cues instantly. Things like overly self-promoting social media profiles, excessively flashy and expensive clothing, or even aggressive dominance within the first few minutes of a group task. Researchers even found that people can accurately detect narcissistic traits just by looking at a person's email address, if it's uniquely salacious or self-enhancing. They are broadcasting their need for power from day one.
Section 4. The expiration date.
But broadcasting dominance has a severe cost. Let's walk through this timeline, which maps out the decay of a narcissist's social appeal. At zero acquaintance, say looking at a photo or a dating profile, the impression they make is highly positive. They appear attractive, confident, and extroverted. But as soon as you have your first face-to-face interaction, even within minutes, those impressions start turning negative. They begin to be seen as disagreeable and unreliable. Over the long term, spanning months or years, that initial charm totally evaporates. Acquaintances eventually rate them as hostile, manipulative, arrogant, and poor performers in group settings. Their appeal has a strict expiration date. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive, gaping canyon between their internal self-view and the harsh reality of the outside perspective. Inside, the narcissist still sees the highly intelligent, attractive superhero, but everyone around them, whose initial dazzle has worn off, now just sees someone who is hostile, arrogant, and completely unreliable. It is a staggering psychological disconnect.
Section 5. Mirror 3. Meta-perception.
So how do they survive this massive disconnect without their ego just collapsing? It poses the most common, frustrating question that everyone asks when dealing with a difficult, grandiose personality. Do they even know how they're acting? Are they totally oblivious to the fact that they are alienating absolutely everyone around them? Well, the surprising answer from clinical studies is yes, they are completely aware. People with pathological narcissism actually achieve what psychologists call meta-accuracy. They know exactly that you view them as narcissistic, arrogant, and difficult. They don't simply assume that you see them in the same glowing way they see themselves. They know you have a negative opinion of them. The crucial point is found right here when we look at how this data breaks down. Think about how this cognitive dissonance is structured. The narcissist rates their own intelligence and attractiveness as the highest possible. They think that you rate them as high, but in reality, their peers actually rate them quite low because the charm is worn off. But consider the trait of narcissism itself. They rate themselves very high, they know you rate them very high, and indeed you do. They are completely aware of their arrogance and their need for power, and they actually proudly endorse it. To resolve the gap between their superhero self-image and your negative perception of them, they use a brilliant, albeit totally toxic, psychological defense mechanism. One of the classic statements highly endorsed by narcissists is simply, "Sometimes my talents are not recognized." They don't change their behavior when you give them negative feedback. Actually, scratch that. They do the opposite. They simply decide that you, the evaluator, are either entirely incompetent or hopelessly jealous of their greatness. They protect their ego by completely discrediting your reality.
Section 6. Recognizing the real impact. While the psychological gymnastics are super fascinating, we have to see how this builds into real-world destruction. Because the narcissist requires constant, unquestioned admiration, and because that admiration has such a short expiration date, the relationship toll is just devastating. Clinical data tracking real-life relationships shows that narcissists have a remarkably high turnover in friendships. They leave a literal trail of broken connections behind them. In marriages, spouse reports show heavily escalating marital dissatisfaction over time, which strongly correlates with increases in verbal aggression and conflict. To cope with the fact that their long-term partners see their flaws, the narcissist will constantly seek out new zero-acquaintance validation, chasing that fleeting first impression high where they are still seen as a superhero. It leaves us with a critical question to consider as we navigate the complex personalities in our own lives, both online and in person. When you encounter that immediate, overwhelming charm, ask yourself, are you seeing someone's true reflection or just the mirror they want you to see? Because as the data proves, true character isn't built in a first impression. It's revealed in the long-term reality when all the mirrors finally crack. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this deep dive has given you a powerful new framework for understanding the hidden layers of grandiosity.